Oh. Rule of necessity.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it.
Okay.
This conference will not unmuted.
I'm on? Good evening. We opened our Harwich Board of Selectmen's meeting for May 12, 2021 at approximately 10 after 5, and then moved to executive session to discuss litigation strategy with respect to the case of 3137 LLC et al. That's the Ember and Port versus the Town of Harwich et al. United States District Court, CA number 1:21 CV 10473. If discussing the matter in open session will have a detrimental effect on the town's litigating position, and the chair so declares. Before we move to the hearing, I wish to read the rules of rule of necessity, and I shall do that now. Next on the agenda is a public hearing involving the Port Restaurant. The Port Restaurant has filed suit against the Town of Harwich in 3137 LLC et al. Versus Town of Harwich et al., in which each member of the Board of Selectmen is named individually as defendant and may have a financial interest in the litigation unless conflict of interest. The board is the town's executive authority, and no other board or official can represent the town's interest in this matter. Therefore, upon the advice of town council, I am invoking the rule of necessity in order for the board to act on this matter. As stated, my financial interest is that I am named personally as a defendant. I ask that each other member identify for the record what their financial interest is. Once this is done, all board members are eligible to participate in the discussion of this litigation. Michael, you wish to
Yes.
respond?
My conflict is also that of financial, as I am named in this in said lawsuit.
Ed?
My conflict is also financial, as I'm a named party to the lawsuit. And if I could just point out, when we opened originally, Mr. Howell wasn't here, but he arrived during our executive session.
Okay. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My financial interest is that I am also named individually in the lawsuits.
Thank you, Don. Michael, can I ask you to open the hearing?
Yes. Mr. Chair, I move that we open the public hearing. I'll read the public hearing notice. The Board of Selectmen of the Town of Harwich will hold a public hearing on Monday, March 22nd, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. for the purposes of hearing applications for renewal of the annual entertainment and seasonal all alcoholic beverage licenses for Port Restaurant and Bar, Inc., 541 Route 28 in Harwichport. The board will hear evidence and testimony from interested parties, including from members of the public, and will decide whether to renew, not renew, or to modify said licenses. The hearing will be held via remote video streaming only. All members of the public have an interest in the topic are cordially invited to log in and view the hearing. Information for logging into and viewing the hearing is listed below and will be posted on the town's website prior to the hearing. It says, please join my meeting from your computer, tablet, or smartphone, and there's a global GoToMeeting link. This was advertised in the Cape Cod Chronicle, March 11th, 2021. I would just point out that the original hearing date was March 22nd. It's been moved or continued up until tonight, May 12th, 2021, no earlier than 5:30 p.m.
Thank you, Michael. We have a hearing notice. I'll take a roll call. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm aye. I will point out that Town Administrator Joe Powers has joined us remotely. Joe, do you wish to open this? And I presume we'll go to Mr. Blake shortly after that.
You gotta read the rule in this. Oh, yeah.
I did.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
We lost you.
I stopped talking when I heard the echo. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
You sound fine
Is
on
that
our
better?
end.
You sound okay for us, but,
Okay, as long as you're not getting the echo, I'll deal with it.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I didn't hear the entirety of your statement after you had indicated that you recognized my presence on the meeting.
The rest of the statement was, you can make a statement now, or we can go directly to Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll defer to Attorney Blake.
Attorney Blake, I'll in turn move to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, this is a continuation of a liquor license disciplinary hearing, a hearing to renew a entertainment license. And at the last hearing on this last week, you had closed the hearing with respect to the renewal of the all alcohol seasonal license and granted that license. So tonight we are here for the liquor disciplinary hearing still, and the the renewal of the entertainment license. I would suggest that, as we had indicated earlier, the hearings and the factual part of the hearing are all one. So you will be able to take everything you heard last week and take into that consideration everything you heard last week for your deliberations tonight on the disciplinary hearing and the renewal of the entertainment license. I suggest the status of the meeting is that I believe that the town had heard all of witnesses that were opposed to the adoption of, or the renewal of the liquor license. You were presented with evidence from your hearing officer, Mr. Powers, regarding the disciplinary hearing and the various violations. And tonight, the last hearing, we had gone through, I think, a number of witnesses in favor of the renewal of the Port entertainment license and in opposition to the disciplinary findings that were found by Mr. Powers. I suggest that we will just continue on that path. But before we do, Mr. Chairman, as you may recall, the last time around, I read you a rather lengthy kind of rules of the road. I would like to do that again. We have a bunch of people on. I don't know who was here before. I do know it. I know that Attorney Tomlinson is here, and he already heard it. But I think it will be repeated. So I will read it again. If you give me a few minutes, I would appreciate that. So, good evening, members of the board. As you know, my name is Jeffrey Blake, and I will be presenting the case to the Board of Selectmen tonight. That is with respect to the liquor license, the entertainment license, and the disciplinary hearing with respect to the ABCC issues. As I indicated to the board last week, the rules of evidence do not apply to a hearing before this board regarding license renewals, revocations, or suspensions, nor do they apply with respect to entertainment license renewals, revocations, or suspension. The touchstone here is due process. Due process is notice and an opportunity to be heard. That does not mean that counsel for the applicant has the right to object and interrupt or threaten witnesses during their testimony. Mr. Chair, this is your meeting, and you have the authority to stop any interruptions. The open meeting law states in part, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of the meeting of a public body. If, after clear warning from the chair, a person continues to interrupt the proceedings, the chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting, and if the person does not withdraw, the chair may authorize a constable or other officer to remove the person from the meeting. That's Massachusetts General Law 30A, Section 20G. The AG describes this provision as clear authority to the chair of a public body to conduct public meetings of the body without disruption. As a result of this authority and the conduct that we have witnessed at prior hearings, the chair has the authority to prevent any disruption of witnesses or the meeting. I suggest that prohibiting objections during the testimony of the witnesses and requiring both sides to refrain from any interruption during the testimony is within the authority of the board. Mr. Chairman, I know you adopted that at the last hearing, and I suggest that that will carry forward, but I'm just giving everybody forewarned. Mr. Chairman, you have the clear authority to stop any interruption. This includes the muting of any microphone and ultimately logging off an offender if there is an interruption. The law requires that you give clear warning to the offender before taking these measures. Additionally, at a prior hearing, there were threats made by counsel for the applicant regarding the failure to provide personal email addresses. And I understand that the applicant's social media sites have continued to post posted personal addresses of citizens that had complained about their noise establishment. This is unacceptable, and you, Mr. Chairman, do not need to allow this line of questioning during any examination of the witnesses. It is well within your authority to stop the line of questioning and instructing the witness not to answer. This hearing is to determine whether the Port Restaurant's entertainment license should be renewed and whether there was a violation of the liquor license last season. This hearing is not about neighboring restaurants or other establishments' violation of their licenses. This is about the Port Restaurant. Mr. Chairman, it is well within your authority to prevent that type of irrelevant testimony, questioning, or evidence. Now, Mr. Chairman, with respect to the liquor license, strike that. We don't have a liquor license. We just have a disciplinary. But with respect to the entertainment license, since the board will also be reviewing the applicant's request for renewal of the entertainment license pursuant to Chapter 140, Section 183A, because both licenses involve the same facts and circumstances, you had heard testimony regarding both, but you are going to separately vote. Again, at the assent of the applicant, we closed the liquor license portion of this last week. You granted the renewal. So again, I suggest that anything you heard last week is should be considered in both your entertainment license renewal deliberations and the disciplinary action. With regard to an entertainment license, the standard is that the license must be granted unless the board finds that the license, taken alone or in combination with other licensed activities at the premises, would adversely affect the public health, safety, or order because it cannot be conducted in a manner so as to A, protect employees, patrons, and members of the public inside or outside the premises from disruptive conduct, from criminal activity, or from health, safety, or fire hazards. B, prevent an unreasonable increase in the level of noise in the area caused by the licensed activity or caused by patrons entering or leaving the premises. Or C, prevent an unreasonable increase in the level of pedestrians or vehicular traffic in the area of the premises, or an unreasonable increase in the number of vehicles to be parked in the area of the premises. So Mr. Chairman, as we had discussed last week, we will, and I just discussed in the very beginning, I suggest that we turn this over to Attorney Tomlinson to continue with his calling of witnesses and examination of those witnesses with respect to the renewal of the entertainment license and the disciplinary hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Mr. Thomason, could I ask you for your comments and then witnesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask a question. From the last hearing on May 4th, there was my understanding was that Attorney Blake had closed his direct questioning of Mr. Powers and other witnesses brought forward by the board, and that as a result, tonight's procedure, as he indicated, would be that the port could proceed with its supporting witnesses. I just want to make sure that I understood that clearly. Secondly,
excuse me, we have a
yes?
question, Mr. Tomlinson, from Mr. Howell.
Yes, Mr. Chair, as a point of order, we did not close the hearing. And I specifically said at that point in time that to the extent there were people who could not make that other hearing and we were just carrying it over, that we also had the right if there were people who showed up, because this is not a witness list. This is not a courtroom. People in a public hearing can show up and be recognized.
If I understood the comment, now ask Mr. Blake to comment, it wasn't the aspect of closing hearing now, it was only that we were through questioning Joe Powers.
Yeah, I didn't want the implication to be any and all other witnesses
I didn't
on our
read that.
behalf.
Am I correct?
Mr. Chair, well, Mr. Chairman, the way I understand it is that you are correct. At this point, though, I don't believe there will be any further town witnesses coming forward unless somebody else that wasn't able to attend is able to attend. But for purposes of tonight, unless we have somebody else come forward, I don't believe that there was going to be any further testimony on the part of the town. But I suggest that we ask everybody in the audience, as we did the last time, to unmute themselves and to show us their faces, and you swear everybody in who's going to testify.
Mr. Blake, that creates a lot of crosstalk, respectfully. I don't think there'll be that many witnesses tonight. I assume that we could just cover that briefly with each witness.
Well, that's fine, but Mr. Chairman, can you ask them to unmute if they plan on testifying and just put their hand in the air and ask and read them the oath?
Can we go ahead and do that? When there's not that many witnesses, Mr. Thomason, we can get it done.
Thank you.
Is everyone who wishes to speak unmuted? Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, and only the truth? So help me God.
I do.
I'm
Okay,
assuming everyone
the
said I
witnesses
do,
have been
so-
sworn. I don't know, Mr. Tomlinson, if your witnesses were involved in that, but certainly you can ask them to begin with if they took the oath.
Then I
Mr.
can-
Chairman, I do notice that there are some of the people that spoke on when the town that spoke first in opposition to the license. I don't know, after Mr. Tomlinson is done with his questioning his people, if you might ask them if they have something new to add that they didn't already provide to you at the last hearing, rather than hear repetitive testimony.
And that's a good point, because if you've made the point before, we don't need to hear it again. We've understood the concerns. Mr. Tomlinson, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And just one final housekeeping matter. At the last hearing, before we recessed, there was the agreement that in order to streamline the process, that I would reserve objections until the close. I also wish to renew that request tonight with your permission. I will make those objections after the close before the board's deliberation.
Okay, that sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, this is Attorney Blake. Again, there are no rules of evidence here. You can let Mr. Tomlinson speak and make objections at the end if you wish. There is no requirement that you do.
Yeah, okay.
Respectfully, Mr. Blake, that was decided at the last hearing that the board would afford me that right. And in reliance upon that right, I did not make objections at the close of the last hearing. And so I'm going to renew that request tonight. If it's not going to be granted, then I will object throughout the hearing.
Well, first of all, Mr. Chairman, it's your meeting. And I laid down, after consultation with you, I laid down the rules. And if Mr. Tomlinson thinks that he can override your rules and object throughout the remainder of this hearing, he's wrong. I don't recall him reserving to the end. I don't know if this is an academic exercise. It's certainly within your discretion to allow him to say something at the end and make whatever objections he wants and make whatever closing arguments he wants if the board needs it. But it's not something that Mr. Tomlinson says, if you don't let me do X, then I'm going to do Y.
Right.
It's not. So,
I agree with that. I'm not, I don't want to go there, but I will afford you some short comments at the end, Mr. Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another quick housekeeping matter. I note that the notice of public hearing that Selectman McCaskill read into the record from March 11th, 2021, that was published in the Cape Cod Chronicle, makes no mention of any discipline related to the July 16th or 17th memorandum from the ABCC. So obviously I'm going to object to any disciplinary discussion because that's not properly noticed before this board. With respect to entertainment, as Attorney Blake did note, the board's requirement is to find good cause. And in the packet that was published for the public in advance of this meeting, there's no notice in that packet which gives reason for the applicant to believe why the board has good cause to deny the renewal and its presumptive right to renewal under the statute. There's no fair description of any entertainment violations which might constitute good cause. And so I would object to any non-renewal for good cause because there is no good cause noticed. Further, with respect to Mr. Powers' statement and his February 8, 2021 findings, there's no recommendation in there with respect to entertainment as well. So this procedure is unlawful and violates the statutory procedure.
Mr. Chairman,
to establish constitutional rights for the license.
if I may, I thought that he was going to reserve those to the end. If he says he's all done with his witnesses, then that's fine, and we can move forward. But
Mr. Blake, I haven't even called a witness yet, so I've afforded you the respect of not interrupting you, and I would appreciate you affording me the same.
You've made the same comments over and over. Please call your witnesses now so we can hear from them.
Thank you. Is Carly Teft on the line?
Yes.
Hi, Carly. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
And were you on the line earlier when the chairman, I should say, when Attorney Blake read the oath?
Yes.
And did you agree to that oath?
Yes.
Okay. So the testimony you're going to provide tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay. Are you a musician that performs at the Port Restaurant and Bar?
Yes.
For how many years have you performed at the Port?
Since the summer of 2017.
Okay. I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Could you move your microphone a little closer to your mouth?
Is this better?
It is. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And I'm sorry, for how many years have you performed at the Port?
Since 2017.
Okay. And roughly on how many occasions each summer do you perform at the Port?
Each summer has been about 8 to 10 shows from May through September.
Okay. Is that a substantial form of your livelihood and income performing for pay at the Port?
Yes. When I book out those shows, I depend on them for my income.
Okay. And when you book shows at the Port, do you turn down bookings or reservations at other establishments?
Yes.
What happened last year when COVID struck with respect to your bookings at the Port?
Well, 2020 was hard enough for us independent local musicians, and I was excited to book 7 shows with the Port in 2020, starting on July 21st. July 23rd. But on July 21st, I was informed that there would be no live shows at all that summer, and that my 7 shows would be canceled.
And I'm sure that was a significant impact to your livelihood.
Yes, it was.
Okay. When you book shows with the Port, do you book them a year in advance or more?
I would say starting in February of the calendar year.
For that season, for that summer?
Correct.
Okay. And is that consistent with other establishments or other bookings that you have? You begin booking them around that same time?
Yes, February and March is when booking starts for my Cape Cod touring dates.
And have you booked all of your dates with the Port for this season?
I have.
Okay. And how many dates is that?
I believe there are 4.
Okay. And did you perform last summer at all at the Port?
No.
Did you perform anywhere?
I did.
Any other establishments in Harwich?
No, none in Harwich.
Okay. And were those live performances or recorded performances? And you
They
understand
were
what I mean?
live.
Okay.
Yes,
And was that indoors or outdoors at other establishments?
outdoors.
And that was during COVID?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe the type of performance that you offer at the Port? Is it amplified? Is it acoustic? Do you play with other musicians? Are you a sole performing artist? Just describe for the board how you perform at the Port.
Yeah, I am a solo singer-songwriter, so I accompany myself on acoustic guitar, and I also sing. And therefore, I do use a sound system that just amplifies my acoustic guitar and my vocals at a reasonable level.
During the performances, since 2017, have you ever been told that your performances were too loud by police or by neighbors?
No,
Have you ever been cautioned by management or ownership at the Port that your performances were too loud?
no, it's always just been be respectful of the neighbors, and I've never had an issue.
Do you bring your own speakers? Do you bring your own amplification system to the Port?
I do.
Okay. And how do you orient your speakers? Are they where would you how would you define your stage as it would be at the Port? Where are you located? Where are the speakers positioned, et cetera?
My speakers, I have two of them. They are always positioned towards the Port restaurant with my back at the fence. And so speakers are faced towards the Port.
Okay. Have you ever played acoustically without amplification at the Port?
No,
And why is that?
no one would be able to hear me, and I couldn't hear myself.
When you say you can't hear yourself, are there other noises that drown out your music?
Yes, from other local establishments, and frankly, I don't want to scream.
So you sometimes struggle hearing yourself over music at other establishments?
Yes,
So the notion there is that amplified music from other establishments is actually louder than the music that you're playing at the Port?
at times, yes, it has been. And so I've just done my best to have a reasonable volume for my acoustic performance for the Port's customers.
And do you have a social media page where your followers follow you at the different establishments that you play?
Yes,
And do you have followers that follow you to these different establishments? They like to know your schedule in advance?
I do. I'm very grateful for my Cape Cod following, and from locals as well as people that come to Summer on the Cape. I've gained even more performances from just performing at the Port, and it's really blossomed my career, not only on the Cape but throughout the country. On the Cape, but throughout the country. On the Cape, but throughout the country.
We're getting interference. Someone needs to mute themselves.
It looks like the organizer muted everyone, including Ms. Teff. Ms. Teff, if you could unmute yourself again, please.
Hello.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to offer to the board in the way of how important outdoor entertainment is to you at the Port?
It's my job, and I'm so grateful to bring my talents to Harwich Port. I've done it summers of 2017, 2018, 2019, and I provide a service to those to help relax and enjoy their time. And I'm very grateful for what I do in a safe and reasonable environment. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to speak here on behalf of not just myself as a musician, but my other musician friends that also perform at the Port. We're just really grateful for the opportunity, and this is our livelihoods. It's not a hobby that we do, and that's something I'd just love to to get across is this is how we make our living. And so we're very excited and grateful for the opportunity to do it again.
Thank you for coming tonight. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that. Thank you. Mr. Blake, do you have any questions for Ms. Teft?
I think that probably ought to come from the chairman, Attorney Tomlinson.
I have none.
Mr. Chairman?
Anyone have any questions?
I would, oh, I'm sorry, the board.
Who's speaking?
This is Attorney Blake, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of questions if the
Okay.
board members don't.
He was waiting for you to call on.
Okay. Mr. Blake, go ahead, please.
Okay. Ma'am, you know that I'm Jeffrey Blake, and I represent the town of Harwich. And I do have a couple of questions for you. You said that you do 8 to 10 shows at the port every summer?
Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, depending on when we can start, but yes.
Okay. And how many shows do you do annually all over the place? You said you've got a following nationwide. I think you said all over the country.
Yes. I don't have the exact number because as of COVID was definitely threw off those numbers last summer, but I am a traveling and touring musician I split my time between here and Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay. And would you give me can you guess? Is it 10 or is it?
No, it's more than 10. It depends, honestly, but my Cape Cod performances have been based around the port for the last few summers because it's been a very important place of work for me.
Sure. Are you from the area?
I am. I'm from Sandwich.
Okay. But you don't know how many shows that you do on an annual basis?
I do. I'm not sure how this is a relevant question.
Well, you just told me that it's a substantial part of your income, and so I'm just kind of trying to get a flavor for how many shows that if the port just how important it is, and I do think it's a relevant inquiry.
I would say that my performances at the port are about a third of my summer performance income.
So you do about 30 shows a summer. What about in the fall and the remaining months of the year?
The fall and the remaining months, I do have some shows, but as the weather dwindles, outdoor performances aren't as common. So I'm particularly performing in outdoor places, and I would say that for the remainder of the year, I don't have as many shows because summer is my prime time for touring.
So you don't perform inside?
I do, but summer is my bigger touring season. So that's how I'm trying to answer your questions there.
Okay. And have you ever performed inside at the port?
No,
Do you know if there's the ability to perform inside at the port?
I do not.
Okay. But you would agree with me if you performed inside, amplification of music and traveling of sound would be easier to control, would you not?
Objection.
We're not in the court. I think we can ask that question.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Teft, if you understand the scientific nature of...
Mr. Chairman, we said that the council was not going to interrupt. I would suggest that you warn him and tell him not to interrupt. He can ask her a question later on or do whatever. But I'm asking a question right now, and I'm trying to get an answer.
Did you
Do you mind
understand that
rephrasing
warning?
your
Let's do
question,
one at a
Mr. Blake?
time. Could you respond to the question, please?
Yes, I just wanted to ask if he could rephrase his question so I can answer it properly.
Well, I mean, you want me to just restate it because you forgot it. But what I said was, you would agree with me, would you not, that it's easier to control sound inside a building than it is outside.
I personally have not looked at the acoustics in that particular building. I do not know where I would be set up, but so it's hard for me to judge. I've gone inside to the bathroom in the port, and that's it. I haven't ever looked to perform inside, so I don't have the ability to answer the question at the fullest potential.
Okay, fair enough. Now, have you done any sound checks and walked away from the property to see how far your sound travels?
I personally have had a manager or a bartender say, give me the thumbs up or thumbs down before we start.
Okay. And
For
do you know
higher sound or lower sound.
do you know how that manager or bartender came to that conclusion?
I do not.
Okay. I have nothing further for this witness, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, full disclosure, I've said this before at other points. I had a band for 20 years, and I played through an agent, and I'm just curious, are there any contract forms with the port, or is this a gig-by-gig arrangement?
This is through a text message, and we state out the time slots, the dates, as well as the compensation.
But there was no consideration upfront as a deposit of any sort for any of these?
No.
Is that correct? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Anyone else? Michael?
My question is actually for Attorney Tomlinson, if I can.
Sure.
Attorney Tomlinson, in past witnesses, and I think it was your cross-examination or correcting of Don Howell, you at least alluded to the port having their own house system. So I guess my question is, do they have a house system or don't they?
I can't speak for the nature of the house system, Mr. McCaskill, and I'm not a witness here tonight.
So your comment that you made, Ray, about the port to Don, about the port having a house system, and it was in the same conversation as parking spots, you don't want to answer that? Or you
Mr.
can't?
McCaskill, I'm going to take offense to your question. Again, I'm not a witness here. I don't testify for the establishment. I have stated that the establishment would be willing to upgrade its house system to be able to control performers' entertainment. That is the statement that I made, and I don't appreciate you twisting it. Thank you.
So your statement now is that they don't have a house system. Let me ask a question about...
No, Mr. Chairman, that is not my statement, and you are also twisting my words, and that's inappropriate.
But you said that they would build one they'd have one in the future. How would you interpret that statement?
Mr. Chairman, you are misinterpreting my statement. I stated that the port has a house system and that they would be able to update that system to be able to control performers' music.
So then that answers
Yes,
the
I did
question.
state that.
They
And
do
I'm not
have a
making any
house
other
system
statement
at the
about that,
moment.
Mr. Chairman.
And they do have a size.
But let me ask, but you choose not to use the house system then, I gather.
I'm sorry, was that question directed to me or to
No,
Ms. Teft?
To Mr. Tavern.
Taft.
What, I probably got your name wrong, but
Mr. Chairman, it's Carly Teft, and I'm having a hard time understanding you.
you choose to use your house system rather than the house system?
I was not given an option to use a house system. I don't believe we had, the port had that ability during 2017 or 18 or 19.
Okay. One follow-up question. Have you had experience, we've had some discussion in past years about house systems that use several smaller speakers around to entertain, but lessens the noise leaving the premises. Have you had any experience with a system like that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Ms. Teft, I couldn't understand the question.
The question is, we've had some discussions in past years. Can you hear me?
Mr. Chairman, no, your microphone, you're sounding very garbled, I'm sorry.
Let me repeat. We've had some discussion in past years, and that using the house system where they had multiple speakers encircling the entertainment area, so each speaker was at a lower volume, was fairly effective in decreasing the noise. My question is if you had any experience with a house system like that.
I have not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again. Mr. Thomason, you want to call your next witness?
Mr. Chairman, may I just ask this witness a couple of more questions? I apologize.
Please, go ahead.
Ms. Taft, I was able, while you guys were talking, to go on your website. You got a pretty nice website, and I actually see here that you have past performances in Sandwich, Tomatoes, and in Mashpee, and then in Saugus. So I think you testified that this was your only Cape gig. That's not really true, is it?
I don't think that was her testimony.
I never said that.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you did. No further questions.
Okay. Thanks again. Mr. Tomlinson, you wish to call your next witness?
Thank you, Ms. Taft. Have a good evening. Is Paula Ribeiro on the phone, on the line?
Yes, I am.
Are you on the video or not? You're not on the video. Okay. See.
I am on video, yes.
I don't see you on the video. I hear your audio.
I apologize. Here I am.
Okay.
There we go. You're in your vehicle. I hope you're
Yes,
parked.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, be safe.
That's okay. Are you? Sorry, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. You're not a musician or a performer at the port?
No, sir, I am not. I am a server at the port.
Okay. How does outdoor entertainment at the port affect your livelihood or your income or your performance at the port?
It has had a huge impact on my seasons at the port. I think it was probably about 4 years ago that the Brackets started really, curating their summer season with performers for the restaurant. And year by year for me in the past 4 years, working essentially the same shifts that I do every season, my income has gone up tremendously. And I do attribute a lot of that growth to something different being offered at the restaurant that people are looking for, which is certainly outdoor entertainment, being able to sit outside, enjoy their meals, listen to musicians. Those sorts of things have really drawn people in for us.
And have you had the occasion to watch multiple performers at the port, including Ms. Taft?
I have, yes.
And are you ever tasked by management to perform sound checks of the musicians to make sure that the sound is maintained at a reasonable volume?
We are all asked to keep our ears open and to make statements to the people that are in charge regarding the volume. And certainly that is something as a server that I have to take into consideration, because if I'm at a table and I'm asking for their order and I can't hear what they're saying to me, it makes my job difficult, and it's annoying for the customers if they're sitting at a table with each other and they can't hear each other talk. So certainly the volume is something that we pay attention to because we need it to be such that we can hear what's happening with our patrons.
And about how many hours a week do you work at the port during this season, the summer season?
High season, I could be there anywhere from 30 to 60 hours, depending on staffing needs.
And are you there on nights when there's outdoor entertainment?
I am. I definitely work Fridays and Saturdays every year.
Last summer, was there any live entertainment at the port?
We were given permission 1 week, I believe, out of the season, and we had one performer.
Okay. So there was one occasion last summer where you had a live performer performing amplified music at the port.
Yes, and he's a solo artist. He sings and he plays the guitar. So it is amplified, sure. I mean, he's got it plugged in, but it's not the kind of amplified music, where there's like electric guitars or a lot of other accompaniment playing.
Okay, it's a single performing musician.
Correct.
Okay. And is it your experience that musical performers at the Port are typically limited to single musicians? They're not rock bands?
No, some of our musicians cover some classic rock music, but they're not rock and roll bands. And I don't believe that we've ever had more than a 3-piece, band essentially play. And it's generally a guitarist, a singer, and maybe someone on a keyboard at most.
When musicians perform at the Port, typically they are, as Ms. Teff described, performing on the rear deck. Are you aware of any other location at the Port?
No, sir, I'm not.
Okay. Is there a sound stage or a music stage inside the Port?
There's not. And, the layout of the restaurant is in keeping with the fact that the building itself is old. So everything is really sort of separated out. There's no one large great space. So if we were ever to try and consider putting somebody inside, no matter what, there would be very few people who would actually be able to watch or enjoy the performer because there are divisions and separate rooms and different areas. But apart from that, our seating and our tables and everything else are not particularly movable. So I don't really know where we would put somebody performing. Where would we put the tables that go where they were going to be? The ceilings are low. I can't imagine it being a good experience.
Okay. If you were to put a musician inside, isn't it true that the only location would be essentially in front of the emergency exit doors?
That truly would be the only spot where I feel like they would be visible to almost everybody and would not make us remove a tremendous amount of seating. And seeing as musicians generally play through dinner hours, it would be lost revenue for not only the restaurant, but myself personally, if I had, 10 seats taken away from my section for a performer, that would be hard on my wallet.
Ms. Teff was asked questions about a house music system. Are you familiar with the music system at the Port? Excuse me.
I am. We do have a house music system, and there are small speakers distributed inside the restaurant. There's one small speaker that is plays to the deck for ambient dinner music. Beyond that, we don't have speakers anywhere else. There are no speakers in the parking lot. There were never any speakers in our tent. I believe the confusion maybe with the house system is that it's not set up currently to be, plugged into a musician's amplifier so that we could control the volume of their music through our system. But I do know that an upgrade of that nature is something that the Brackets have discussed wanting to do. It's very simple. I would have no idea what the cost of something like that would be, but it could be done.
Thank you, Ms. Rivero. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
I do have one question.
Sure.
A lot of our concern and discussion has been regarding noise, and I appreciate the discussion you've had on music. But in addition to music, we can have crowd noise that can get quite loud. We did get one video, and I'm almost sure it's in our packet, Mr. Tomlinson, but it shows a crowd, very crowded area outside, obviously having a good time throwing beach balls around and stuff, and I gather very noisy. If something like that occurs, what's the step that your management can do or do to try to hold it down, if you will?
Ms. Rivero, as an employee of the Port, I'm not going to ask you to speculate as to the chairman's question. You're not management, you're not ownership. You don't have any personal knowledge of this. So you don't feel compelled to answer the chairman's question.
Okay.
Just for the record, it's not speculation. It's on tape. We've all seen it, but go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, the establishment has not seen it despite request, nor has Ms. Rivero. So you're asking her about something about which she has no personal knowledge and is not relevant, in your words, to the entertainment license. We've already discussed the 10. That was done last week, Mr. Chairman.
No. We'll unmute you and you can try again.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I mean, Ms. Ribeiro has talked that she's been given direction by management on other areas. I'm wondering, your question goes to what direction? Where is she given when the crowd was getting too noisy? What were the servers supposed to do in cases like that?
Ms. Ribeiro, if you understand Mr. McManus's question, you can answer it, but I don't.
So there's actually two levels, I feel, to what you're speaking to. If you are asking me the general rule of thumb for if we have patrons who are getting a little bit too rowdy, what do we do about that? We have doormen at night who will assist us if we're having a hard time getting people to listen. And, we have management that we can go to if we're having problems. As far as crowd noise from last year, I think that there are a lot of factors that should be considered. I think that first and foremost, people had been cooped up for quite a long time and they were very excited to be out. And there was certainly a different level of excitement for people to be seeing each other, to be social, than I've seen in past seasons. I don't think anybody could have been prepared for what happened, with just volume of business last year. I know this from speaking to other restaurants as well. There were a lot of people here on the Cape. It looks like there probably will be again this year. And I think that it was a situation last summer that is not going to be mirrored in the future because it was a once in a lifetime season. It's changing. It's getting better already. We can only do better from here.
Thank you for that. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Ribeiro, there's been a conversation about lost income, both in the preceding witness and I think you brought up, depending on the increased crowd. Would it surprise you to hear that there was no outdoor entertainment at all on their license listed until 2017, and that further, that there was no outdoor seating to go along with that until COVID occurred? It was just, the request, as I recall, was for outdoor entertainment with like steel drums on a patio deck, and it was for people waiting. It was not for people dining. Are you aware of that?
Mr. Ribeiro.
Excuse me, this is another situation where you haven't been recognized.
Excuse me, Attorney Blake. I don't think there's anything fun.
Yeah.
Ms. Ribeiro is an employee of the port, and she is, as such, my client. And so I am entitled to counsel her when she is being.
So we have an opportunity now to ask a question of the witness. She can choose to answer it or not, but we haven't asked you the question, so I'll proceed with that. And I'd like to follow those rules.
Mr. Chair, my point of order was that this is controlled by the chair, that anyone who wishes to speak has to be recognized through the chair, cannot just simply interject. We've made that point numerous times. This is not the first time that this is coming to Mr. Tomlinson's attention. If he doesn't get your attention to be recognized, he has no particular right to speak at all.
Yep.
Okay. Nor do you, Mr. Howell.
Excuse me, a point of order, I do, and apparently you haven't read Robert's Rules of Order recently.
As of last week, Mr. Howell, neither had you. But let's go on, Ms. Ribeiro. If you,
we're going to keep muting you until we can get this in order.
Mr. Ribeiro,
Mr. Ribeiro, do you wish to answer the question?
Mr. Ribeiro.
I cannot speak to what, licensing or any of that would have looked like in past years. I'm not privy to that information.
Okay.
Okay, but that was my question.
Excuse me,
I'm still asking questions. That was the point of my question, is that ultimately you don't really have any idea about what the expectation of the patron level would be for outdoor entertainment?
No, sir, that's not my job.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have just one quick question, Mr. Chairman. This is Attorney Blake.
Yeah, Mr. Blake, go ahead, please.
Sure, ma'am. How are you? As you may know, my name is Jeff Blake, and I'm town council here in the town of Harwich. A couple of things. Did you take the oath before, at the very beginning of the meeting?
No, sir.
Okay. So do you affirm that the testimony that you've given and are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you. One question, you had indicated earlier that you and other employees do sound checks on volume. Can you tell me what that means by, I mean, I know what a sound check is, but can you tell me how you perform those sound checks?
I don't believe I said that I perform sound checks. What I said was that we have been asked by management to be aware of the volume of the music that we're listening to. And for me, that breaks down to if I am standing 4 feet away from someone who is asking me for something, can I hear them? And if I have customers who are saying, you know, having conversation at their table, if it seemed to me that they were having a hard time hearing each other, that I should speak to management. Those are the things that I said that I would do.
Okay. And did you ever walk to the property line or 150 feet away from the property line to determine whether or not you could hear any noise?
I am not a manager. I am a waitress.
Fair enough.
That's not my responsibility.
Yep, understood. All right, I have nothing further to ask you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrow. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Thomason?
Is there any?
Another witness?
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Just
Yes.
recognizing you
Is there
for
anyone
another
else?
witness.
Sorry, is there anyone else on the line who wishes to speak in support of outdoor entertainment at the port?
Yeah, I have a few things to say. This is John Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Are you a musician who performs at the port? Well, let me back up for a second. Attorney Blake
Excuse me, Mr.
asked
Thomason, I have a point of order
witnesses,
here.
were you present
Mr.
to take
Thomason,
the oath?
that-
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was not, but I'm happy to.
Mr. Dillon, are you willing to take the oath?
Yes, sir.
Is everything you're about to testify to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as far as the best of your knowledge?
Yes, sir. It is.
Thank you. Are you a musician or employee of the port, Mr. Dillon?
I performed at the port for the past 3 years.
On how many occasions did you perform at the port over the last 3 years annually?
It was every weekend. I think I was a Saturday night guy. So whatever that adds up to.
Sure. And is it your past experience that you essentially negotiated your contract over a text message or email, some form of writing with ownership about your performance and compensation therefore?
Yes.
And did you perform at all last summer during COVID?
There was one time, I think there was 1 week where it was allowed, and I performed. I was easily 30 plus feet away from anyone, but sadly it was only one time.
And are you a sole musical artist, or do you perform as part of a group, a trio, or a band?
It's just me, acoustic guitar and my voice.
Okay. Is your acoustic guitar amplified?
Yeah.
And are you reminded by ownership or management to keep your volume within a reasonable level?
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of one of the things I wanted to say is the port is one of my favorite places to play because of the low-key nature of it. It's very intimate, and it's relatively early, so we're not going, in my line of work, it's usually a happy hour, 5 to 8 kind of set, or 6 to 9, which is usually 6 to 9:30 or so at the port. And, I kind of like that it's not the rowdy crowd. I like to sit and play sort of intimate songs. I'll play some of my own music. And, yeah, I mean, towards the end, maybe the energy picks up a little bit, but for the most part, I appreciate the low-key nature of the shows.
And do you perform at other gigs outside of the port?
Yeah, I play all over the Cape, Woodshed, Chapin's Fish and Chips, Ember. I've played in Key West and San Diego, all over the place.
But your standard Saturday night summer gig is at the port?
Yep.
How many other times a week do you play other gigs, other locations?
Well, that's the thing. Usually I'm playing anywhere from 5 to 7 times a week. And last summer was a big hit, not being able to play at any of those places. So last summer it was, 2, if I was lucky, 3 times a week. Did you play at other establishments on the Cape last summer? Yeah, I played at Chapin's Fish and Chips and the Pelham House Resort.
Oh, okay. And during the gigs that you play at the port, how would you characterize the income that you receive from playing gigs at the port? Is it a substantial part of your income?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's huge. Yeah, it's I think with the port and Ember, it's about half of my yearly income. I mean, it's a lot.
Are you already booked to play at the port this summer?
Yeah, well, Griff had hit me up a few months ago before all this transpired, and he's usually, I mean, I really appreciate that he's always ahead of the curve, and he said I could play. I'm really looking forward to it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If you're denied the ability to play because the board denies outdoor entertainment at the port, have you lost those weekends, or will you be able to pick them up at other gigs?
That's the thing. There's so many places that are struggling with all the COVID regulations. They don't really know, what they're allowed to do, if they have the space to do it. And so if I don't have the port, then it's going to be a big hit, no matter how you slice it.
So the size of the port affords you greater flexibility during COVID to be able to play. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. And so really what we're dealing with here is an impact on your livelihood.
100%. Yeah. And not for nothing, I do bring my younger brother. He has special needs out. He's my manager, and I can't tell you how much it means for him to be able to come out and play. And he helps, load in, load out, and I give him some money. And so there's more than just me affected by this.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you.
Any questions, Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, is Mr. Dillon on the phone? Or is there a reason why we can't see him as a witness?
Honestly, I've never used this. Let me see.
At the bottom of the screen, there should be a tab with a camera that's got an X in it or a slash on it. If you hit that, you should be visible.
There we go. How you guys doing?
Still in the dark.
Can you see me?
No?
Nope.
Oh, well.
I just thought it odd
See me?
because this is the first time we had a witness we couldn't see.
Yeah.
But let me go on anyway. As I asked Ms. Teft earlier, and you may or may not have heard it, I know I've played like probably hundreds and hundreds of gigs through the years, and even with a contract, if there was no deposit, my question is to you, typically in any engagement that you have, is that enforceable? Have you ever had occasion to be canceled and then you've gone to small claims court and made them pay you for the missed gig? Or is that a solid booking that's got a deposit on it?
There's no deposit. Honestly, I've been doing this for 3 years, like I said, and I've never really had any big contract or official a contract like that, just because, you know, it is kind of a small operation.
Has anyone ever canceled you, ever?
Not that I can think of, no.
You are a lucky musician.
I am, yes.
Thank you, Don. Other questions from the board? Mr. Blake, do you have questions?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dillon, my name is Jeff Blake, and I represent the town. I'm town council here. And I do have one question for you. With respect to your sound, do you said you had your brother that helps you. Does anybody else help you?
No.
When you do sound checks, do you walk to the property line to see if you can be heard from the property line?
Well, that'd be kind of hard for me to do because I'm making the music.
What about 150 feet away from the property line?
Again, no, if I'm playing music, I can't check myself.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Thank you.
One other question.
Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just been recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dillon, just one other question. What's your rig when you're playing? The equipment?
It's just an acoustic guitar, and the only thing I've ever used at the port was a single Bose S1 sound system, which if you talk to a lot of music gear guys, they'll tell you it's not loud enough for a big venue. It's more of like a coffee shop thing.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Thomason, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Mr. Dillon, for as long as you've been performing at the port, have you ever been the subject of a noise complaint that's been brought to your attention by neighbors or the police?
I have not, but I can say that management is very diligent in making sure that my sound is not too loud because I don't know, it's an intimate setting, and like I said, I think people appreciate it being that way and not, blowing your eardrums out.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you leave, I have one more question.
John,
Sure.
when you play at the port, when does your sets end?
So it's usually, I think I misspoke earlier, it's till 10 o'clock, but it's always a sharp cut off time.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd say maybe 9:55, the managers come out and tell me to wrap it up.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson, you have another witness?
That's all, Mr. Sorry, that's all, Mr. Dillon. Thank you.
Thank you.
The floor is yours, Mr. Tomlinson.
I'm waiting for Mr. Dillon to exit and mute himself.
Okay.
Oh, there he goes. Thank you. Who else is on the line today that wishes to speak in support of the Port's Outdoor Entertainment? Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, this was the first night that the port has been open, and most of its patrons are trying to enjoy that atmosphere tonight. So it looks like we don't have 250 people here tonight to speak in support of the port.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me ask before, I've said I'd forward you some brief comments at the end. Before we go there, I think as Mr. Blake said earlier, there's some of those that have concerns we should speak. If they have anything that's not been said before, they can do so now. Hearing none.
There comes one.
Well, here comes one.
Sorry.
Again, please don't repeat comments you've made before.
Okay, who you're going to recognize?
I'm going to
Sure.
recognize, I can't quite read that from here, but the
bottom right is Bob, bottom left is Bob Nickerson. and-
Bob, I'll go with Bob Nickerson. I can, and you have a brief comment?
Has he been sworn in?
Have you been sworn in?
You're muted.
Mr. Nickerson, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Mr. Nickerson. Have you been, the question I have is, were you sworn in before?
Maybe go to the bottom.
Go to the.
Mr. Nickerson?
Are you speaking now? Let me go to the other Bob on this, as I see on the right hand bottom.
Bob Cohn, is it?
No,
Yes.
Bob Cohn.
that's not Bob Cohn.
That's
Who's
not
that?
Bob Cohn.
It's another Bob.
Well, we have two Bobs. Does one of the Bobs want to speak up? If, while we're waiting, there's Bob Cohn. We'll let him speak then if you wish.
Two things. I think you're the guy who
Bob, have
now
you been-
who was trying
Bob,
to speak.
let me
Bob,
interrupt you.
Bob
Were you,
Piantadosi?
Bob, were you sworn in?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Proceed, please.
Okay, so two things. The guy in the bottom left is Bob Piantadosi. I just, last summer, it may have been different than other summers, but when Mr. Dillon was performing, we could hear him on Pleasant Street. And we called the restaurant 3 times. This is testimony I gave earlier. And on one of those nights, we called 3 times and nothing was done about it. We heard him on Pleasant Street for that full week. But then after that, it got quiet. That might be different because he was 30 feet away from the tent. That's all I've got.
Okay. Thank you. Bob Nickerson, are you on now? While we're waiting, we have another Bob Hennessy, is that right?
Bob Campo,
Bob Reed?
There's Bob Reed. Bob Panadozzi is just the plain Bob.
Okay. The plain Bob, do you wish to speak?
Plain Bob.
Joe, do you wish to speak?
I do. Sorry, just trying to turn my camera on here.
Should identify himself again.
Could you identify yourself again and let me ask you if you were sworn in at the beginning?
I was sworn in. My name is Joe Ganley. I'm in the butter of the port on C Street in Harwichport.
Please, brief comment that is not a repeat of what we've heard before.
Yeah, I won't repeat the testimony I've given to the board before, except to say this, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to speak tonight. I understand there's 2 issues before the board. One is the entertainment license, and the other is the discipline associated with the COVID violations that have been found to be true by the town administrator and the finder of fact. And I really just wanted to speak mostly to the COVID violations.
Mr. Chairman.
I think that it's telling that there were COVID violations found by the ABCC state investigators on July 16th that, according to the sworn testimony of the ABCC investigator, that there was a discussion with the manager of the port on that evening related to those COVID violations. And that when the ABCC investigators returned to the port the very next day, on July 17th, they found fundamentally the very same violations. So I would suggest to the board that at some point, the credibility of the applicant has to come into question here. There was a discussion with the investigator about the violations. There's not a question of notice. There's not a question of we didn't know what the rules were. They were put on notice the night before, and the very next day, they were found in violation of the very same regulations that they were found in violation of the day before. I think at some point, this board has to understand that this is the approach of this establishment, that they look at violations as a cost of doing business, and they're willing to push the envelope, and they're willing to do whatever they need to do, to maximize their business and their revenue, and regulations and rules be damned. And at some point, I think the fact that you have ABCC investigators who visited the establishment on 2 consecutive days and found the very same violations should be relevant to this discussion with respect to discipline.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe? Michael?
I do not have a question for Joe, but I have a question for Attorney Blake.
Attorney Blake?
Sure. I'm here.
Attorney Blake, at the start of this meeting, Attorney Tomlinson raised concern about the public hearing notice related to this subject, the violations. Can you speak to that?
It's my understanding that the public notice with respect to the violation indicated that there was going to be discussions regarding the February 8th, 2021 disciplinary hearing. Therefore, I think that they were on notice. They had the packet.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Any questions for Joe? Let me ask Mr. Tomlinson.
Yes, I have questions for Mr. Ganley.
Okay. Please.
Mr. Ganley, good evening.
Good evening.
You're a lawyer, are you not?
I'm not a practicing lawyer, no.
You're not a bar-admitted attorney, but you did attend law school.
Correct.
Have you had any ex parte communications with any member of the board or Mr. Powers or the chief of police?
Relevant.
Why, I don't understand
sure.
why that's relevant, Mr. Tomlinson.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ganley himself claimed that his testimony was relevant to the issue of the COVID violations, and I'm simply asking him questions related to that. So I do believe that it's relevant, and I think you should afford me some leeway.
Mr. Chair?
Don?
Just to the point that's being raised right here, what would be the fine point difference between ex parte communication and lodging a complaint, which any citizen has the right to make? Where's the delineation, Mr. Blake?
Mr. Blake isn't here to answer your legal question on the record, Mr. Howell. I have a question pending for Mr. Ganley. I would like him to answer the question.
Actually, Attorney Tomlinson, that is my exact role here. I am town counsel, and I advise the board with respect to legal questions. That is my role. And your answer, the answer to your question, Mr. Howell, is there isn't a difference. You are right. They have a right as a citizen to petition their government with complaints and the like. It's my understanding that Mr. Ganley has done just that.
Thank you, Mr. Blake.
Mr. Tomlinson, you have
Mr.
another question?
I have more questions for Mr. Ganley, yes. Mr. Ganley, you've repeatedly testified over numerous occasions in the past few weeks, including in your written correspondence with the town, that you have no concern with music at the port, that your issues stem from crowd noise and patron noise under the tent. That's your testimony previously, correct?
Correct.
So you have no objection to outdoor entertainment at the port?
I have no objection to outdoor entertainment at any establishment in Harwich, so long as it's done in compliance with the town's noise bylaw.
Have you had a chance to read the noise bylaw?
I have.
And given your legal training, do you find any concern with the noise bylaw?
I'm not sure I know what you mean by concern with the noise bylaw.
Mr. Chair, he's not in a position to interpret
Do you know
our
what the noise bylaw? Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I am in the middle of a question.
Not if it's not relevant.
But I don't think that that's particularly relevant.
Mr. Howell, that question was not directed to you. It was directed to Mr. Ganley. And I would appreciate you showing me some respect and not interrupting me. I am doing my level best to not interrupt you. Thank you, Mr. Howell. Mr. Ganley, given your legal training and your review of the noise bylaw, have you identified any procedure in the noise bylaw whereby a neighbor can raise a complaint to the police department or otherwise about noise which you believe disrupts your quiet comfort?
No, point of order comes before anything.
We don't, he doesn't have to. I have a point of order here, Mr. Tomlinson, so I'll take that first.
Mr. Chairman, can Mr. Ganley answer the question before you interrupt me?
He may not.
I'm happy to.
You're gonna instruct a neighbor, a resident, not to answer a question?
I have a, Mr. Michael?
Mr. Chairman, I am cross-examining a
Jamie,
person
please.
here. You cannot instruct him not to answer.
My point of order, if I'm heard now, my point of order is simple. Mr. Ganley's legal training is not known to this board, and Attorney Tomlinson's questioning him based on his legal training. I would completely object to that line of questioning, and I think Mr. Tomlinson's getting completely off track, and I don't think Mr. Ganley's past legal knowledge has any stake in this whatsoever. He's not testifying as an attorney. He never said he was. So I would ask that Mr. Tomlinson stop this questioning.
Mr. McCaskill, did Mr. Ganley communicate with you
Don't address
in
me,
writing
address the
about
chair.
about legal factors to address
Tomlinson?
this proceeding?
Don't address me, address the chair.
Okay. Mr. Tomlinson?
Mr. Chairman, did Mr. Ganley communicate in writing with the board and give legal analysis upon which this board relies?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that the board take a 5-minute recess and let the temperature come down here.
Move we take a 5-minute recess.
I would ask that Mr. Blake refrain. I would ask that Mr. Blake refrain from any ex parte communications with any member of the board during the recess. Thank you.
Listen, I'm their attorney. I will communicate with anybody that I feel appropriate. I will not violate the open meeting law, but this ex parte communications is just not even relevant. It's a word that you and Mr. Kelly have thrown out along with your unconstitutional and the like. I would suggest that we take a 5-minute recess, Mr. Chairman, so that we can discuss this matter.
We have a motion and a second.
Can we vote on it?
We'll vote on it.
Aye.
Don, Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I am aye. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Off our cameras.
Unmuted.
Thank you. I understand we have one resident who hasn't testified at all before. I'd like to give him a chance, and that's Bob Reed. Bob Reed, can you join us?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I wasn't finished with my questioning of Mr. Ganley. I just have a couple final questions.
Thank you,
for him.
Mr. Thomason, but I've decided to move on. Mr. Reed?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to
Point of
object.
order.
I was
Will you
not
mute him
finished with
again?
my questioning of the witness.
Just for clarification, you are done with that witness. I've moved up. We're going to ask Bob Reed to be our final witness. Again?
Okay, where's?
Mr. Reed has his speakers on too.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, my
Mr.
objection
Reed,
was
you
that
have
I
to
was
turn
not
your
finished with my
speakers off
questioning of
because you're
Mr.
getting an echo. Do you wish to testify? And have you been sworn in?
He's muted.
You're muted now.
He needs to turn off his speaker and leave his microphone open.
Can you unmute yourself? Mr. Reed?
He's trying.
Still not unmuted.
There you got it, I think.
Still not unmuted. There you got it, I think. Still not unmuted.
It indicates. Yes.
Mr. Reed, you would have to take your volume of your speaker down to 0 and then unmute yourself.
It sounds like there might
Okay.
be on in the background.
I'm not sure how to do that.
Is your TV on?
Well,
if you go to the bottom right of your screen, there is a replica of a speaker. That needs to be muted entirely.
we'll give you another minute, then we'll have to...
Sorry.
Can you call?
He's got the TV.
If you have the TV on, we're hearing in the background.
In the background. That needs to be turned off.
Oh, turn, okay, turn the TV on.
Oh, no, off.
Off. TV off. And then it looks like you're unmuted now.
Okay.
Try it now.
Can you hear me now?
We can. So we look forward to your brief comments.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Frustration.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Apparently you can't hear us.
It's because he's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I can hear you.
What an ordeal. I was not sworn in.
Mr. Reed, do you swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, and only the truth, so help you God? So help you God?
I do.
Okay, please.
Okay, please.
I just have a couple of points to bring to the selectmen's attention. Last summer, when my wife and I were working in our retail establishment, which is the building closest to the port, directly across C Street, while we were open, I heard loud music. And I didn't know where it was coming from, so I walked outside and observed that it was a single singer-songwriter playing at the port with his system directed towards the tent, and he was outside. I went over there, spoke with him briefly during a break, and asked if he could turn the volume down slightly. And he was uneasy with that and suggested I talk to the manager. I went, and there were some outside server and hostesses, and I asked them if they could get me someone to speak to about a noise complaint. And a few minutes later, the manager came out, identified himself. His first name is Jake.
I told him what my issue was, and he launched into a massive stream of profanities and told me that he knew the noise regulations and he was aware of those things and they had all the appropriate permissions and I could just basically pound sand. I was pretty upset with how I was treated because I was very pleasant when I went over, and I went back to our store and I called the police, and then I went back and stood in our parking lot, which is in fact the lot that the port had been referring its dinner customers to park in, even though it's a private parking lot, because their parking lot was no longer available because it is where the tent was housed. And a few minutes later, a couple of police cars did in fact arrive and start talking to them. So the point I want to make is that earlier testimony at earlier hearings under oath by people at the port that they were never aware of any complaints simply was not true. And I have other things to add, which are also sort of complaints about their operation, but to keep your hearing short, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the witnesses we're going to call. Mr. Tomlinson, I said at the outset that I'd give you a chance to for a brief comment before we close the public hearing.
I just have a couple questions for Mr. Reed.
Yes.
2 questions, and relevant, please.
Mr. Reed, how far was your store from the port? It's directly across C Street, correct?
Yes.
So that's about 40 feet total?
No, our building is a commercial building with 8 retail establishments on the ground floor and offices upstairs. It's actually fairly large, and we are in the farthest diagonal position of any of the establishments in our building. So we would be, at least 6 to 8 times further away than the closest part of our building.
What time did you go to the port to speak to the musician? Was it early afternoon or was it 10 o'clock at night?
No, it was not 10 o'clock at night. It was late afternoon.
Okay. And have you made complaints to the police before about any music noise at the port?
No, I had not.
Okay. So the one time you did make a complaint, the police did arrive. The music was turned down, and it was during COVID when the musician was playing with the speaker, as you indicated, pointed towards the tent.
Yes, it was the only time I ever recall seeing outdoor musicians in the parking lot there. And it was, again, last summer was the only summer of the tent. So I'd never experienced that before. And this was the early part of the summer.
And when you spoke with Jake Domos, did he appear to be working very hard to control a lot of the COVID concerns at a restaurant?
I couldn't read anything from his appearance except that he seemed furious that I was concerned about the level of the noise.
How far would you estimate your store is from the port in feet?
Mr. Tomlinson, he answered that already. I've asked you before not to. He asked the same question in different formats. One more question.
It is not the same question. I would just ask an opportunity to have a brief and reasonable examination of a witness without interruption.
I've asked you not to ask the same question in different ways.
He never answered how far. He simply said that his store was at the other end. I'm simply asking, how far is that? Is it 100 feet? Is it 125 feet?
That's your last question. Mr. Reed, you can answer that, and then we're going to move on.
I'm going to object to the chairman's instruction.
But in terms of walking from the entrance of our store to the port property, one has to walk on a sidewalk along one side of the building, make a turn and walk in the other way. So I never thought I would need to measure how long you'd travel on there, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably about 80 paces or a little more from our door to the port.
But
Okay.
you've never had
Thank
any
you,
noise
Mr. Reed.
complaints
Mr.
about the
Thomason?
outdoor entertainment at the port
Mr.
other than last summer?
Thomason, we're through. We've
I'm
called the
sorry,
witnesses
I
we
had
wish
asked-
to.
I had asked Mr. Reed a question.
No.
I had asked Mr. Reed a
No,
question.
mute him
And I would
again.
ask him,
Mr. Thomason, as I said on the outset, I'm going to give you a chance to make a closing comment. And Mr. Dickerson, I think at this point we've heard, I think enough to move. Unless you have, Mr. Nickerson, do you have something that's new?
Star 6, Mr. Nick.
Star 6?
What a dumbass.
Bob, we still can't hear you. So at this point, Mr. Thomason, do you have some closing comments?
I do, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
What about the,
Well, excuse me, I have one more witness that hasn't testified before. Can you identify yourself, please? It's Bob. I can't read the.
Good evening.
Has he been sworn in?
Good evening. Have you been sworn
Can you hear
in?
me?
yes.
Yes, I did. Yes, I was.
Okay.
And I'm not an attorney, so if you can put that question
Thank you, Bob.
for right now. I guess my comment is a little more generic, but it speaks to the noise issue and the
Mr.
entertainment.
Chairman, I hate to interrupt this witness, but can we get his name, full name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Bob Piantadosi,
Okay.
and
Thank
we
you.
live on Bank Street
Thank you.
in Howardsport. Thank you. So as I said, my question is a bit generic, and just may allow me a bit of latitude. I've been listening to the testimony over the last few weeks, and I guess my perspective is that most of these issues would evaporate if we hadn't issued entertainment licenses. Not that I'm opposed to entertainment, but when we sit on our patio over the last few years, and last year's a bit of an exception because of COVID, we spend a lot of money on our patio. We have to go indoors because between the different venues,
Excuse me, Bob. We have
Yeah.
a point of order here from Mr. McCaskill.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask.
Okay.
I would ask that we get to a question or a comment about the Port Restaurant or the violations at hand. We're not here to talk generalized about noise licenses or what has happened in the past. This hearing is specific to the Port Restaurant and very
understand.
specifically to the entertainment license and the violations. And we have had hours and hours and hours of hearings, and I'm sure there'll be another venue for us to talk about the in general comments, but tonight's not the time for them.
well, this is my one opportunity. And when I went to hearings, the noise hearings, Michael,
Bob,
that
let me
yes.
let us move on. I think we've heard a lot of pros and cons, and we're getting to a spot where I think we can address the issues tonight, which is the entertainment license for the port and the violations. Thank you for that. We'll have additional points to discuss.
Entertainment general is noise, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
It's related to the
Entertainment noise.
Related to the port. I would ask you, I
related to
respect
the
your views tonight, but I'd like to move on. We're anxious to settle the entertainment license question and the violations question. Mr. Tomlinson, I had said at the outset we'd give you a chance to make some brief comments before we close this hearing and move into our deliberations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Piantadosi, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly.
That's fine. Piantadosi.
I'm sorry that the board did not afford you
Mr.
an opportunity to
Tomlinson,
speak.
I just asked
If you have,
Mr. Tomlinson, I asked you if you make your closing comments so we can continue, we can close this hearing. So that's what you're, that you can do that, or we can move ahead without your closing comments.
Mr. Chairman, I won't be denied a closing comment. I was afforded that and reserved that at the last hearing.
We will.
To anyone that's
Is that your
listening,
comment now then? Is that what you're doing
my closing
now?
comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I have the floor, you gave me the floor, and respectfully, I'd like an opportunity to be able to speak without interruption, yet
You have
again.
it. Go ahead.
Mr. Piantadosi and to anyone else
That's
who's
not your
listening,
closing comment. I give you, Mr. Tomlinson,
Mr. Chairman,
I give you one more
Mr.
chance.
Chairman, I'm going to object.
You either go to your closing comments, or we will
I am
close the
making my
hearings,
closing
and without
comment, Mr. Chairman.
giving you
I
that
am making
opportunity.
my closing comment, and you are interrupting me. You gave me the floor, and then you.
He has to be recognized with.
Mr.
You
Tomlinson,
took it
let me
away.
recognize Michael for point of order here.
Point of order. The speaker that you're speaking to started to make in general comments, and the board did not take up that discussion. So addressing him now is completely off base. And I don't understand why you can't make closing
Addressing him
arguments.
in particular.
Hey, the floor is mine, Ray.
You may address me as Attorney Tomlinson, Selectman McCaskill. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now he wants to talk about rules.
Yeah. But
That
No, I
witness
just
was
expect
not a witness.
special
He did
decorum.
not testify against your client, so can we please move on?
Mr. Tomlinson, as I said before, if you want to make a closing comment, I'm offering you that opportunity, but it has to be a closing comment.
Mr. Chairman, I'll define what is my closing comment, and I'm going to offer it now. I respectfully request that you not interrupt me. It'll only take 30 seconds. So with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I'll begin.
Go ahead.
The only lawful action that the board can take tonight is renewal of the entertainment license as it existed in 2020. The notice from March 12th of 2021 makes no reference to Mr. Powers' February 8th findings or anything with respect to COVID. That is a blatant open meeting violation. The only lawful action the board can take tonight is renewal of the entertainment license as it existed. The public notice is defective with respect to even to the entertainment license. There's no clear notice that the board intended to deny renewal of the entertainment license as issued in 2020, and there are no stated reasons in that notice packet which give the board license to claim good cause to deny renewal of the entertainment license or other fair description which might constitute good cause. The port has had no noise violations in 3 years. The board issued the entertainment license without condition or restriction in 2020. COVID presented a unique set of challenges. That is without question. Whatever concerns the public may have with respect to that are essentially mooted by the fact that the board took away any opportunity to offer an outdoor tent. Renewal can only be denied for good cause. Public need is not the renewal standard, contrary to your attorney's statement or to Mr. Ganley's written communications with you giving legal analysis about public need. The Ballerin factors do not apply and are not relevant to a presumptive right of renewal of the entertainment license. There was no recommendation made by Mr. Powers concerning the entertainment license. This board's procedure is unlawful. It's not in accordance with the statutory procedure and violates clearly established constitutional rights of the licensee. We have evidence of ex parte communications outside of the formal record. Witnesses, neighbors are talking directly with members of this board when they are not sitting as the board and in which they are serving their own selfish, biased agenda. So the selectmen's packet was updated with no prior notice or opportunity to be heard by the license holder, and the updated packet was rejected and intentionally omitted documents that the licensee wished to be included in that public packet, which are relevant to the public's review thereof. Each selectman and Mr. Powers engaged in this unlawful procedure as they each and collectively considered adverse action against the license holder. Again, the only lawful action tonight.
Mr. Tomlinson, I'm going to stop you there. Muting, please.
Kevin, I am mute.
You appear to be arguing a court case rather than a hearing tonight for an entertainment license. So
You asked, I was entitled to make a closing statement. I reserved my objections and I'm making them now.
You're done with your closing statement at this point.
You're denying me the ability to close my final statement.
No, I'm not.
On the record, Mr. Chairman, you are denying me the ability to close my final statement. You've denied me the ability to
On the
question
record,
witnesses.
you've
and now
made a
denying me
closing-
the ability to make my objection.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, he asked for 30 seconds. You gave him 30 seconds. And it's well within your right to not give him any time. You gave him time, and I think you can tell him to wrap it up.
So Mr. Blake is advising you to still give me more time to wrap it up. That's what I'm hearing.
Very quickly.
Mr. Chairman.
About 2
This
seconds
board's
worth.
biased and selective enforcement against the port violates its constitutional rights. That is the basis of the lawsuit, and the public needs to know that. The public also needs to know that you have unfairly invoked the rule of necessity at your convenience. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, I'd entertain a motion to move out of,
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
is there any discussion? Take a roll call. Don?
Aye.
Wait. Attorney Blake's.
Attorney Blake?
If I may just briefly, what I often do after this, I mean, actually, you can close the public hearing and then I can provide you with the standard. I will say that Mr. Attorney Tomlinson mischaracterized what I told you. With respect to an entertainment license, the standard is not the Ballerin factors, and I never even suggested that this time around. But you can close the public portion hearing of it, and then I will provide you with the standard for the entertainment license for you to deliberate on the renewal of the entertainment license and the violations found by the ABCC inspectors.
Okay.
I still make
Thank
that
you.
motion insofar as we can confer with our lawyer, and he's not testifying after this.
Right, okay.
So,
And we have a second?
You have a second?
Take a roll. Don?
aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm aye. The public hearing is now closed, so we'll take no other comments from the public. And so at this point, we'll leave Jeff and Joe Powers, and Mr. Powers will join us.
Mr. Chair, I'd particularly like to hear our lawyer's take on.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to just reiterate for the board that the board is going to review the applicant's request for renewal of its entertainment license under Chapter 140, Section 183A. And that with respect to that license, the standard is that the license must be granted unless the board finds that the license taken alone or in combination with other licensed activities on the premises would adversely affect the public health, safety, or order, because it cannot be conducted in a manner so as to A, protect employees, patrons, and members of the public inside or outside the premises from disruptive conduct, from criminal activity, or from health, safety, or fire hazards. B, prevent an unreasonable increase in the level of noise in the area caused by the licensed activity or caused by patrons entering or leaving the premises, or prevent an unreasonable increase in the level of pedestrian or vehicular traffic in the area of the premises, or an unreasonable increase in the number of vehicles to be parked in the area of the premises. That is the standard for the grant or renewal of an entertainment license. I never said at the beginning of this hearing that it was the so-called Ballerin factors. So when you're making your deliberation with respect to the entertainment license, I will caution the board on one thing. It says that the license must be granted unless, and it's typically, courts will look at whether or not the license can be conditioned such that any of the three or four concerns that are properly before the board can be alleviated.
Attorney Blake, just to reiterate, we can issue the license with conditions, and the conditions again are public safety, noise, public order.
It would be protect employees, patrons, and members of the public inside or outside the premises from disruptive conduct, from criminal activity, or from health, safety, or fire hazards. B, prevent an unreasonable increase in the level of noise in the area caused by the licensed activity or caused by patrons entering or leaving the premises. Or C, prevent an unreasonable increase in the level of pedestrian or vehicular traffic in the area of the premises or an unreasonable increase in the number of vehicles to be parked in the area of the premises.
Can you repeat B
Thank you
again?
for that.
Can you repeat B again?
B, prevent an unreasonable increase in the level of noise in the area caused by the licensed activity or caused by patrons entering or leaving the premises. Or C, well, you just want a B, sorry.
So those are the factors. I'll take any input. Don?
Mr. Chair, I thought we would take the matter of any kind of license infraction and
Violations first? Yeah, that was my, thank you, Don, for that. Joel, do you wish to comment on the violations?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
I need to object to this. Mr. Powers has already
Not part
testified.
of this meeting, so just keep your mute.
The hearing's over.
Mr. Chairman, I'll continue as your duly appointed representative as town administrator in the matters, any and all matters that the board has referred to me, including the matter that you just spoke to, Mr. Chairman. If you'd like me to continue, I would just remind the board that you can rely upon the memorandum dated February 8th, 2021, which gives a brief recap of the hearings that took place regarding alleged violations that were brought to the town's attention in the spring and summer of 2020. And just remind the board that my conclusions as contained in that memorandum are that the alleged violations that were presented to me as hearing officer, the testimony that was provided led me to conclude that in fact the establishment did in fact violate or did cause 3 violations of the laws of the Commonwealth.
Again, I'm going to object to Mr. Powers giving further testimony after the public hearings.
You need to be recognized.
Can we vote him?
If Mr. Thomason you can listen, but you're not part of the deliberations at this point. You've had your chance. And if you
Mr. Powers is also not part of the deliberation. He's not a member of the board.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I would, if I may comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, the absurdities of Attorney Tomlinson notwithstanding, Mr. Chairman, you've recognized me as the presiding officer of the public body known as the Board of Selectmen. And Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I've responded to your direction.
Thank you.
Doesn't make it lawful, Mr. Powers.
Thank you.
Yeah, neither does your actions of speaking without being recognized by the chair, Ray.
Mr. Chair,
If
Mr. Powers, I'll take
Mr.
direction from the
Tomlinson,
chair. Thank you.
at this, if you interrupt one more time, what we'll have to do is we'll have to lock everyone out and have a couple, and I'll ask a couple to call back in so that you're absolutely prevented from commenting. You can listen, but I can't have you interrupt we've closed the public hearing. And you understand that, I hope.
Mr. Chair.
Don?
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond.
No.
No, thank you. I just got recognized as part of our deliberation. Mr. Chair, before I make a motion in the matter of discipline, I'd like to hear if our lawyer, Mr. Blake, excuse me, the hearing's over. I'd like to hear from our lawyer about if he has anything that he would like to add prior to a motion relative to any kind of disciplinary action.
Well, I just know that at the hearing earlier last week, there was a decision by the ABCC which indicates at the end of there the decision that the commission suspends the license for a period of 6 days, which will be held in abeyance for a period of 2 years, provided no further violations of Chapter 138 or commission regulations occur. The decision was dated December 6th of 2018. Obviously, these violations occurred within the 2-year time frame from that particular decision. So I believe that you can take that into account when you are when you are issuing a determination and/or during the penalty phase and suspension phase, if any, of the license.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Don?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion then for consideration and for discussion then. I move that there's been sufficient finding of facts to uphold the town administrator's findings that liquor license violations occurred at the Port Restaurant. And based on those infractions, a suspension in the duration of 6 days shall be imposed at the local level on that license, except that imposition shall be held in abeyance for 60 days in order to refer the matter to the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission. Should that body impose its own sanctions, then our suspension action would be deemed to have been superseded by their action. If no action is taken by the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission, the town of Harwich shall impose its own suspension penalty of the license to commence no later than August 2nd and run through August 7th, 2021, a total of 6 days.
Is there a second?
For discussion, I'll second it.
Second, okay. Do you have some discussion, Ed?
I don't.
Michael?
So my only discussion, I think the ask of 6 days in a row for me seems excessive. I do think that we should have I think ABCC was clear and that they came up with the 6 days. As far as I'm concerned, the action of this board does not have to match the action of ABCC. And for me, in concert with my motion, I believe, or at least my suggestion of a warning for the Ember based on their violation, I would be willing to give one of the 3 dates, the May 22nd date, a warning, putting then 2 violations in the books, and I would shorten the term to 3 days instead of 6 days, and would give them 2 months to serve those 3 days, but not. It would have to be meaningful. So in December or January is not going to work for me. It has to be meaningful. It has to be a punishment. But I'd be willing to support a 3-day suspension from the town. Whatever ABCC does, they do. But I think we should lighten that if we can. 3 days.
I like that, but if you're agreeable, we still hold this in abeyance based on that part would stay intact, what you're suggesting.
I will point out, Mr. Chair, that the dates I picked were to only be one weekend night. But in fairness, to protract this out, I mean, I could see going for 3, but then you'd have to do August 2nd, 9th, and 16th. I mean, those are only Mondays, and I'm not sure if that's a sufficient penalty.
I guess my sense is that this, and I'm not downplaying COVID, and quite frankly, I'm a bit disgusted by the report from ABCC with the manager of record, Jake Domos's comments to the ABCC. I'm also a bit disgusted that there's been no admission of doing anything wrong at all, but I still think, that a punishment has to be given, but 3 days without a liquor license in August is, in my mind, is excessive.
The reason, Mr. Chair, if I might, that I was actually willing to do the 6 is because it is clear that the manager of the facility was calling 3 separate ABCC investigators liars. That's a matter of testimony. It's not just what happened with Mr. Powers. He said it to us directly. Now hearing Mr. Reed and hearing a string of epithets as a response after we were told no one has ever complained to me. That was a quote. And I'm sorry, behavior is behavior. I mean, I heard people that are going to be disrupted, but they're not mad at us. They're mad at the inability of the people who employed them for having an inability to confine their activities to within the 4 corners of the law and their license. I'd be willing to go for 3, but I'm telling you that it has to be more substantial than just Monday night, because dining, the peak times are at the end of the week, and I tried to take every precaution to not do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If I were to go for 3 dates, it would have to be 3 dates like 3 Fridays, or else I wouldn't modify the motion at all. So, I mean, I'd be willing, as I said, to recast this as.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the 3 days.
7 and 14.
Of a thought,
If
but
Mr. McManus is willing to withdraw his second, I'd be willing to make that motion as 3 days. Everything else would be the same, 60 days to be able to have the ABCC to opine to us, and that the 3 dates would be August 7th, 14th, and 21st. Those are successive weeks.
okay.
And if Mr. McManus is willing to second that.
Yeah, I'd be willing to, withdraw my initial second.
And that would be the replacement, is the actual assessment of penalty would be 3 dates. Only if we do not hear from the ABCC, because this is.
That part's still
This is
intact.
moot. If they actually take up a penalty of their own, we are not imposing this in addition to that.
Right.
So should that not occur, then August 7th, 14th, and 21st is what I am motioning.
And Ed, will you second that one?
You're proposing 7th, 14th,
August 7th, August 14th, and August 21st.
3 Saturdays.
Is that Saturday or is that Friday?
That's Saturdays.
Okay, well, the 6, 13, I don't want to do the Saturday, 6, 13, and 20, if those are the Fridays. Let me look it up.
Well, again, I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that? Are we,
Let me just take a look. Yeah, he's right, so 6, 13, and 20 would be the dates.
I guess my only comment would be, maybe we do 2 consecutive days, but to take away 3 Fridays in August. And I do agree, Don, with your comments about being lied to. I do agree with the comments, my previous comments, that the manager there seems to be extremely disrespectful and not willing to admit anything. It's not lost on me that we have not heard from the actual owners of the establishment. We've heard from a lot of their employees. We've heard from their managers. We've heard from their families. We've heard from public, but we have not heard one word from the actual manager of record and applicant. I would think, maybe 2 consecutive days, a Thursday, Friday, and then another Friday. But
Would you like to make a motion to amend?
I don't think we need to. I think
I'm willing to go with 5, 6, and 13 then, Thursday, Friday, and Friday.
I would support that.
yeah, because I'm
If
in agreement.
Mr.
We want
McManus
to send a
withdraws his
message,
motion.
but we want to have them business too.
My second.
His second. If you withdraw that,
I'll withdraw the second.
then the motion is intact, except that the suspension, should the ABCC not exercise their intent to violate, that would be August 5th, 6th, and 13th. And I'd like to also make a comment.
Do we get a second before?
Second.
Yeah, Ed seconded it.
Okay. I made a big deal about the premises description last time. And it means something to me. I held a liquor license myself at one point for packaged goods, and we were responsible to stop people, because it was packaged goods, from using our premises to eat, to take wine or malt and open the container while they were eating a sandwich that they bought from us, because we did not have an on-premises pouring license. I'm disturbed that there could be any allegation that, yeah, if that's alcohol, we didn't sell it to them, because you're responsible for the entirety of activity on your facility, in the licensed premises. You are, especially in a pouring license, it is your obligation under state law to stay within the licensed premises. You cannot cause somebody as a patron to walk out with a wine glass full. So it doesn't matter whether it's the parking lot or anything else. The described premises We took great pains last week to describe what they were. And so that rubbed me the wrong way, that people were waiting for their food out by the supposed wait station, and they were drinking, but we didn't serve it to them. I just want to make the point that that in the future, that's something that I'd have a zero tolerance on, if they start thinking that the parking lot is okay to serve it.
Thank you, Don. Ed?
Yeah, well, it's not only your responsibility to keep customers from walking off the premises with beverages you serve them. It's also your responsibility to keep those clients from walking onto the premises with beverages they acquired elsewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We have a motion and a second. I'll take a roll call. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm aye.
Mr. Chair?
Discussion about the liquor license.
No, the entertainment license. Mr. Chair?
Entertainment. Yeah, entertainment license, sorry.
Given what our legal counsel had said, and to prevent an unreasonable increase in noise in the area, as I pointed out, we gave them increased. This is reverting back to similar licenses passed in similar establishments this year. I've objected to a number, as every member of the board knows, to a number of these that due to COVID had expanded, and I'm really trying to get to the point where they can control it. So I am not going to not renew the license, but the conditions that I'm suggesting are that that I make a motion that we approve weekday entertainment from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. outside with unamplified acoustic music, because there is no seating right now, so we're not going to be competing with a crowd. 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. inside with recorded or live music with amplification, but consistent with our noise bylaw in terms of it being heard off the premises. And I further move that Sunday's entertainment license be granted from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. outside with unamplified acoustic music, and 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. inside with recorded or live music with amplification, again, consistent with our noise bylaw in its restrictions.
Okay.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, discussion?
So the only, I guess the only comment, and I think that we have to address is when we had the conversation the last hearing was the ambient music, non-live music. So they do have a porch outside, they do have the tables out front, and we did approve to have background music last week. So is that off the table for you, Doug?
No, actually, I would be willing to grant that outside if it is ambient music, but not live music. If there is live music, it needs to be acoustic.
Will you just add that ambient into your motion?
Yes. So again, weekday would be 6 p.m., 10 p.m. outside with unamplified acoustic music only, or ambient amplified music. 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. to 12 a.m. inside with recorded or live music and with amplification consistent with our noise bylaw. And on Sunday from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. outside with unamplified acoustic music only or ambient amplified music. Also 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. inside with recorded or live music and amplification consistent with our noise bylaw.
I'll second that.
Second that. Before we vote, let me just check with our counsel, Attorney Blake. Are we in order with our motions?
I believe you are. I believe you are.
Thank you. Other discussion, Michael?
The only other discussion I'll have, and I think, it was Attorney Tomlinson made an awful lot of comments in the end there, but it was more, that would be more related, I guess, to when we go to court.
Yeah.
But, he said an awful lot about what the public should know. And I think one thing that's fair to say, and I would ask any member of the public that thinks that we're out of bounds here to go back to the May 8th, 2017 hearing. And then to go to the February 26th, 2018 hearing. The May 8th hearing, the manager of record, Justin Brackett, sat before us with Attorney Kelly and said that the outdoors of the port on the deck was going to be a jazz band or a steel drum band for waiting patrons. Questions were asked and answered, but his representation was that it was going to be jazz band, steel drum band on the deck for waiting patrons to get tables inside. Based on the testimony that we received tonight from the two musicians that play at the Port, they both testified that they started in 2017. So as soon as we gave that license, the owners of this establishment decided to grow this entertainment license to what it is now, which has received numerous complaints. And we could split hairs about violations. We still had noise complaints. So it's not a quiet thing out there. And I will say it again, when members of the public talk about their quality of life being destroyed by our decision and entertainment licenses, it is our obligation to have this conversation, and it's our obligation to act on it. So all of the disruptors in the meetings over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and people using ethnic slurs and swearing and getting muted from it, and this process being deteriorated in my mind, and taking away from some of the public to be able to freely speak. It's disgusting if you go back to and look at the sincere comments made by the manager of record that it was for a jazz band or steel drum band. And then further into February 26th, after there was a complaint of 2018, after there was a complaint about the expanded offerings outside there, they had to come back and do a site plan. In that site plan, he still maintained that it was for music for waiting patrons inside, after these bands have been hired to play outside, based on their own testimony. And Attorney Kelly and I got into it at that meeting a little bit, because his idea of jazz and steel drum differed from mine. But it was pointed out, and to the public, May 8th, 2017, Board of Selectmen's meeting, February 26th, 2018, Board of Selectmen's meeting. Watch the meetings. Watch the meetings and watch what the public approved. We had a public hearing for the public to approve something. There was a pitch done, and it was approved by the board based on that, and it's morphed into this. And we are being completely attacked for doing what we're supposed to be doing. And the rest of it I'll save for court.
Thank you. Don?
I totally agree with everything that Mr. McCaskill said. The only thing that I would add to this is particular circumstances. As I said, I've played a lot of gigs in my life, outdoors, indoors. I've probably built about a dozen sound systems for churches and theaters. I know how sound travels. I mean, to Mr. Tomlinson's point about being an expert or not. In the particular area that this is in, I mean, it's not a secret. I've made comments about the place, the license that was issued to the Claddagh. I made comments about Embers. None of them are in an area that's this densely packed and adjoining the residences as this is. And since I took the opportunity to look up on Google Maps, Reed Books happens to be 170 feet away from the port's front door, never mind the back parking lot. The challenge here is where they are. And we have to take that into account, because that's what's inferring itself onto the community and creating an unreasonable increase in noise in that area. It just happens to be where their place is. That's the place they chose to establish. I was there when they first were granted a license in the early 2000s, and so was Mr. McManus. And this has morphed into something much bigger through the years, and Mr. McCaskill's absolutely right. The words steel band and jazz band were used, and that's not what we got.
Well, you know, very briefly, this has been uncomfortable for us. We understand that in the area we live, there's always an inherent conflict between restaurants and businesses and the abutters. And our hope is that they always work together and compromise and help each other out. And our problem in this time, that obviously didn't happen with the heated hearings we've had. But I'm hoping we'll pay attention, and that will be, we'll further that direction going forward. we voted, right? I've lost track.
Point of information? Point of information, please?
Not at this point. We've closed the public hearing, so I'm afraid I'm going to take a vote on this motion. Is there, Don, or Ed?
Yeah, well, first off, in 2017, when this was first approved, I wasn't a member of the board. I was
2005.
Oh, in 2005, yes, I was. But when this was, but I have reviewed the recordings of that meeting, and it was presented as background music to provide music for guests waiting for their dining experience, and it was also asserted that it would never. They weren't looking at programming music as a major attraction. Well, that's what it's turned into. I remember the years before I served on the Assembly of Delegates as a selectman then, all the hearings we had over at Cape Cod Clatta, which I wasn't around, but in the early years of them having music out by the pool, it was a little afternoon light thing and nobody cared about it, but then it grew into something else that became a major disturbance of the neighborhood. And we went through hearing after hearing trying to work a compromise with the neighborhood, and what we realized that, that had become the driving force behind the building, and it was the business, and it was basically had become inconsistent with the neighborhood it was in. And that's unfortunate, but so the Clatta as it stands now has had significant restrictions on and conditions placed on their outside music. It's also limited to acoustic only. And that's, the Port Restaurant's entertainment offerings started out as simply background music for people waiting in line to get seated, to turn into the major driving force behind running the operation. And it's become, again, inconsistent with the neighborhood.
Thank you, Ed. We have a motion and a second. I'll ask for a roll call. Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm aye. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm aye. Thank you. We'll